Welcome back to Extra Holiday Games. I'm Extra Holiday. I forget to do the emotes. We died to one of the bad guys. I want to go back there and get my echoes. But if I lose those echoes, I'm probably just not going to bother going back there. Because I think well, okay, there might be other stuff over there. Okay, we're going to try and fight the bad guy again. But it's going to be difficult. And in fact, that's exactly what I want to talk about. Some more. I talked about it last episode. Difficulty. So, we've discussed some of the wrong ways to do it. Namely, hey, pick. So I think the worst way to do difficulty is probably just to not have any options, for one. And no, the Soulsborne games don't count as that because the Soulsborne games, as I discussed last episode, have different options in the way you can build and stuff that will make it easier or harder depending on what you do with the game, right? You can reduce the need for mechanical skill via making smart choices, is the idea. And of course, when we're talking about difficulty, I think that's the main thing we are talking about, is the need for mechanical skill. Because I don't think anyone's complaining that, oh, this puzzle game, like, well, it's a good example of a puzzle game. Okay, maybe a strange example, but oh man, Wordle is just too hard. I wish they had I wish they had difficulty options. No, I don't think anyone's saying that, right? If you've got a puzzle game, then I think it's pretty widely accepted that if you can't solve the puzzle, then it's not really an issue. And I think that's a weird, like almost double standard there. But I mean, I'm not particularly upset about it, so ow. That was the most awkward kill I've ever gotten. So yeah, basically I believe we're discussing the requirement for mechanical skill when we're talking about difficulty here. And yeah, I mean, so I think the worst way to do it is to just not have an option. It's just, here's the game. There's no option to do this hard, or make it easier, make it harder. And funnily enough, I think an example of this it's weird because it's not necessarily, well, okay. It can actually be argued that this is a bad game, but it's probably going to be a hot take for me to say so. Super Mario Brothers. That game does not have a difficulty option. And it's actually a really hard game. Well, okay, not like super, super hard. It's not like Dark Souls hard, but it's funny. But it's a hard game, right? But it works. It definitely gets away with it, partly because, ow, it's a super old game. Stop just doing that one move. Oh my god. It definitely gets away with more because it's an old game, and old games back then were meant to be hard, right? It was just kind of understood that video games were hard at that point in time. But I think that is a good example. I mean, we can look at the newer Mario games where they get made fun of for doing this, actually, but I do think it's actually a good thing. In fact, let's talk about Mario Maker 2, because that is a series that's running at the same time as this one on my channel, on this very channel. you may recall, probably not, because not a lot of people have watched that series, and especially not a lot of people have watched the original run through of that series. I played the story mode in Mario Maker 2. And one thing, one little bit that kept coming up when I was playing it is in that game, when you die like twice, I think. If you die like twice in a level, the game will offer a number of things to you. Right, it'll have a little pop-up with Luigi's face and it'll be like, oh, do you need some help? And I got really annoyed because it felt patronizing to me because, you know, I'm a gamer and I should be able to handle, ow, fuck, anything that the game throws at me. However, I think it's good that they have that, right? They have options to, and they have a bunch of options too. They can be like, hey, I can show you how to do the level. I can do the level for you. I can give you a power up so you can do the level easier, right? And I think that's probably a pretty decent solution. Like, again, you could maybe tailor it so that it doesn't feel as bad for people who, for people like me. Oh, God. Oh, hey, you grabbed my echoes from seemingly nowhere. Ah! Okay. I'm not trying. Okay, no, the gun doesn't do anything. Got it. Okay, got him. Oh, holy crap. That was a lot of fucking echoes. Yeah, I think Mario Maker 2's solution is not terrible. Right? And it's not even the first game to do that sort of thing where they see like, oh, this person's having trouble, let's offer them a little help. In fact, one of the defining features, one of the things on the box of the game Left 4 Dead was the fact that the difficulty adjusts based on how well you're doing. And they phrased it like, oh, it adjusts so that it's never too easy. But also, in that same vein, the way it worked, it also would be adjusting so that it was never too hard. So, in the end, Left 4 Dead ended up being a good example of actually... Also, there was nothing over there. I'm disappointed. Left 4 Dead actually ended up doing difficulty in a fairly good way. And it was, I feel like it was one of the first games to do that sort of thing. And that's cool, right? I think that way could work for a lot of games. I think the hardest hurdle with that is, like I said, just making it so that the players who want to take on the full challenge, who feel like they could accomplish it, don't feel like they're being patronized when they're being offered help. And so that, and making it so that, because the other side of the coin here is making it so that people who do take the help don't feel bad that they're taking the help, because that's going to sour their experience as well. So, I think so far that's probably the best example we've seen of difficulty in games, is having a challenge but then offering help with that challenge if you notice the player is having trouble. And actually, I want to tie this in real quick to something else. Tutorials. Because tutorials are actually also tied to difficulty, right? Like, some games would be incredibly, impenetrably difficult if not for the tutorial. I'm thinking like 4X strategy games and stuff, although I don't actually have any experience with those, so I don't know. So maybe like, what's a game I have played that would be super hard without a tutorial? I mean, people like to shit on the League tutorial, but it actually is helpful. So I guess we can use League as an example. Without the tutorial, League would be much harder. It's already hard even after the tutorial because there's just such a knowledge curve, not necessarily a learning curve, but a knowledge curve when it comes to League. Right? Just knowing what each and every champion does improves your gameplay by quite a bit. But the biggest thing is that
farewell, good hunter.
That game would be a lot harder without its tutorial. So, point I was getting at. Tutorials. I think ultimately tutorials should probably be handled in that way, where they're offered to you, particularly in games where you're expecting the player to already have some experience playing games. I think tutorials, in a lot of cases, should be offered to the player if it seems like they're having trouble with that specific concept. Not necessarily by default. Because, hey, let's talk about Pokemon Sword and Shield versus Pokemon Legends Arceus. Or Arceus. I should be calling it Arceus, I think. Because one of the biggest gripes I've seen about Legends Arceus, so far it seems like people are really liking Legends Arceus, and I really enjoyed what I've played of it too. I was supposed to play more of it today, but that didn't happen. Yeah, because I canceled stream today. But in Pokemon Sword and Shield, if you watch that series, which is on this channel, you may recall that I was ecstatic that when I had already caught a Pokemon prior to the catching tutorial, it didn't actually make me go through the catching tutorial. The game said, oh, you've already caught a Pokemon, you know what you're doing, we don't need to tell you this. And that was awesome. I loved that. Legends Arceus, the biggest thing I've heard people complain about is the sheer amount of tutorials that you have to go through before they even give you a chance to prove that you already know what you're doing. So, I think in a lot of cases, the correct move is to present the challenge to the player, make sure they understand the challenge, right? Make sure they understand what their goal is, and then let them try to figure out. And if it seems like they don't know what they're doing, and you know, it seems like they're having a bit of trouble with it, then you offer help. And you don't force it on them, because that is annoying. I think that's the smart way to do it. Okay, let me try it. Nope, I wanna. Okay, can't actually get in front of the attack. Cool. Okay, now he's dead. Okay, alright, good. Alright, so yeah, tutorials and difficulty, I think, can be handled in a pretty similar way. And that is to offer help when it seems to be needed. Because here's the thing, right? You can collect data on what the player is doing, right? You can figure out how much time they're spending on this challenge, how much time they're spending on specific parts of the challenge, what their exact inputs are, and you know, you can determine from that, you know, what they're doing wrong potentially. And yes, that takes a little bit of effort. I'd say a little bit, it probably takes a lot of effort. And yes, that takes effort, but in doing so, you help to ensure that nobody's getting lost and nobody's feeling patronized. Or at least too lost or too patronized, I should say. Because, yeah, I will admit, in Legends Arceus, I was on board enough that I didn't really mind the tutorials too much. Like, if I were any less excited for that game than I was, I could see myself getting annoyed. So yeah. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Why am I going this way again? Oh yeah. Because I wanted to go left at the top of the stairs. Alright. Ow, fuck you. It's an interesting topic, difficulty in video games, and I don't think it's as simple as Dark Souls should have an easy mode. Arguably it does, but also arguably it's not easy enough. I guess that's just a summary of what I was talking about with these games in particular. Last episode. Okay, I dodged twice because I wasn't sure I was gonna get away from it. Get through the attack. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to play a game that's not a challenge. Well, okay, sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. But, but if every game were like that, it would suck. And also, nobody wants to play a game that they just feel they could never beat. And that's the thing. Because I've been playing video games for so long, I've been, pretty much my entire life, any game that I run into, I feel like I could beat eventually, right? Given enough time and effort, I could beat it. But there are people out there who don't feel that way. People, ow. Okay, alright, bud. There are people out there, I think this is largely people who don't play a lot of video games or haven't played a lot of video games in the past. There are plenty of people out there who would like to play games, but they feel that potentially that there are games out there that they potentially just could not beat no matter how much time they put into it. No matter how hard they tried. And so it's good to have options for those people to, if only to assuage them that they can beat the game. They can do the thing that they want to do. Because, again, if I were to hand the controller right now, if I were to hand the controller over to my mother, ow. Well, she, maybe she wouldn't have taken that hit, but, no, I'm dead. Okay. I'm dead. We're running. And dead. Okay. If I were to hand the controller to my mother and tell her, all right, you can beat this game, she probably wouldn't believe me. She probably wouldn't believe me. She'd probably be like, no, there's no way. She'd walk up to an enemy, probably not even see it because she wouldn't know how to operate the camera. She'd be like, oh, okay, there's definitely no way I could do this. When in fact, she could. It would just take a lot more than it would take me. So, yeah. It's worth acknowledging. And that's the thing. I keep saying that's the thing. There's so many things. That's a thing about this situation is there are people out there who'll be like, oh, well, so what if they want to get into gaming, but they're not good? Then they just shouldn't play games if they're not good at them. And I think that's a really lame outlook to have. It's probably not a hot take, but ow. But yeah, I think to say that is kind of dumb. Because hey, guess what? If nobody who was bad at games played games, eventually there'd be nobody playing games. Because, us people who have been playing games will die out eventually. So, I mean, I guess the argument there comes from well, I don't want my games to be ruined by, you know, ruined for me for the sake of other people being able to play them more. But that only happens when that sort of thing rarely happens, you know. That only happens when a developer is especially clumsy about it. Which, yeah, I don't think that happens very often. And hey, you know what? Here's the thing. There are a lot of ways to make a game harder, right? One of the most famous examples, and one that I've done again on this channel, that's the sword playthrough, is a Nuzlocke, right? It's to impose rules on yourself that make the game easier or harder. And that's kind of ow. Well, in the case of Nuzlocke, it makes it harder. Yeah, so to impose you can always impose rules on yourself to be like, hey, I don't want to use this technique that makes the game too easy, so I won't. And yes, that's not an insignificant amount of effort, but it's a lot easier than taking a game that's super hard and somehow making it easier. So, yeah. I'm not honestly, I would rather have all games be too easy for me than all games be too hard. Because if they're too easy, like I said, I can make them harder myself, right? And theoretically, yes, there are things you could do to make a game easier, like, oh, you could install this mod that, you know, changes health bars and stuff. But again, that's relying on someone else to do it, because I'm not a modder. So, yeah, it's easier to make things hard than it is to make things easier. Yeah. Well, it does remind me. I have been... What? I guess I should probably remember that, because, you know, I'm not totally foreign to game design. In the practical sense. I do... Like, being a DM is, in part, a game designer job. So, that is something I should probably keep in mind when I'm designing things. Is that it is easier to make something harder than it usually is, than it is to make it easier. But hey, maybe things will be easier next time. Because, as for this episode, that's a wrap. And I got caught up in the discussion there.